Okay, we're streaming live.
Okay. All right, welcome everybody. This is Lance Luke and Martin Pea. Ask the Building Expert Masterclass webinar series, and we have an interesting subject today called The Dangers of Working with Hazardous Building Materials. Now, you don't have to be a contractor to understand the dangers. If you're a homeowner doing weekend warrior repairs or building your own house or handyman stuff, this could apply to you, as well as if you're a real estate agent, realtor, you're a property manager, you manage condo buildings, you're a developer developing an old building, attorney, architect, engineers, anybody who's interested in this subject would may be interested in learning a couple of things. So before we get started, this webinar is presented by Construction Management Inspection, which is a Hawaii-based construction management company. We do building inspections, construction management, and forensic investigations. If you have a water leak or something is cracking, we kind of want to look at different things like that. I'm advancing these slides fairly fast to get to the start. Okay, so also thank you for participating on our Zoom platform. We're actually restreaming on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So if you have any questions, if you're on our Zoom platform, you can ask them in our chat or what else do we have? The chat feature, and we have discussion feature. And then social media, you can post to Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. If we can't get it live, can't respond live, we'll be able to respond to you shortly thereafter. We have a good track record of responding to everybody who asks questions. And if you don't have a question, you have a comment or just want to say things, then that's fine too. You're welcome to do that. So we'll get into this presentation talking about historical data. Of course, houses were started in the old days. They're just built out of, lumber, like logs, log cabin, and all that. And then, as things made progress, the industry started coming up with new and improved building materials or different kind of materials to use to build, to use in construction. So many materials, once considered state of the art or brand new, were later found to be not as healthy, highly toxic. It could be materials that are made out of plastic or um, concrete or drywall, right? There could be asbestos in the material. It could be lead in the paint, um, other things like that. So just let you know. So um, historical data, there's hundreds of thousands of buildings today, and it's homes. We're talking about any kind of building. It could be a home, single family home, duplex, multifamily, apartment building, condominium building, office building, a golf course, shopping center, a church, a school, any number of buildings, industrial. They all may fall into this one pot where older buildings may have some hazardous materials. So older buildings, schools, homes, office buildings, may contain asbestos, lead paint, and other risks. Now, the cutoff date for asbestos and lead paint, according to EPA, is 1977, 1978. That's when um, the construction industry stopped using these materials because it was determined to be hazardous by the Environmental Protection Agency. Okay, so basically that's the cutoff date. So if you have any property, managed property, or owned property that was built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even the 70s, right? There's a chance that it may contain any number of hazardous materials. And realtors throughout the nation um, are educated and trained to know this because when they're representing sellers or buyers, there's a disclosure, um, specifically a lead paint disclosure is by law. It's mandatory that they have to let the uh, buyer know. Either they're aware of lead paint or they don't know if there's lead paint or not. But there could be based on the age of the building or property. Okay, so very important things to be aware of. And as you know, there's many buildings that are in this category built prior to 1977 or 78. Now, you might say, well, what's the problem? Is if the house is old and let's say it has asbestos and lead paint, do I have to move out? Do I have to knock down the house and build a new house? No, you don't. But you just have to be aware of these things. If you're gonna do any work, right, construction work that involves damaging building material, let's say you have lead paint on your house siding and you're going to add an addition and you got to knock down a wall. Well, you got to be careful because now you're dealing with lead paint, right? So drywall could have asbestos in the drywall, in the tape joint or the mud that they use for drywall finish. Okay, so you don't want to cut the walls, and now the asbestos is released in the air. Similarly, if you have this popcorn ceiling, and you may say, well, I don't like the look of that ceiling. It's collecting dust and it's somehow looking yellow, and I just don't like the look of it. So let's scrape it off and paint it so, or texture it so it doesn't have that cottage cheese look, right? So if it has asbestos, it's not good to be fooling around with it. Even if you have hire a contractor to do that, the contractor is at risk too. So there needs to be protocols that need to be followed, and there are protocols, right? Department of Health and OSHA, they have specific protocols, and the state contractor licensing office has protocols for the contractor. Okay, so there's hidden danger in doing any kind of work on properties that are in the older range. So any renovation, repair, demolition can release harmful fibers, and we're talking about asbestos fibers or dust. And if there's mold growing, there's spores in the air. Now, mold by itself is not considered a hazardous building material because it's not like you're going to go to the hardware store and buy a sheet of drywall that has mold in it. Okay, so the drywall doesn't come, it's not made with mold in it. Mold appears afterwards. So theoretically, it's not really a hazardous building material by itself, but it becomes hazardous later due to moisture, water leaks, and all that. Okay, so there's a difference. I just thought I'd clear that up. So I don't know if you see the images here, but if you do, the one on the left, um, a house is being remodeled, and they had old drywall there. So you need to remediate, or you need to test first to see if there is asbestos. If there is, then you need to go to the next step. You can't just have any old contractor, or if you're the homeowner, you can't do it yourself. Like, cut out asbestos in the drywall. Okay. Also, there could be other issues. Like if you look at the image on the right, the far right, here you have an old house and you have an excavator basically taking the house down. Now, was it tested before? How do you know? If you see all that dust, it could be asbestos, dust, fibers in the air. It could be lead paint, right? So that's why the rule is you can't just go and do whatever you want. You have to test first, and if there is hazardous materials, you have to abate it. You have to hire a licensed abatement contractor, and they have to come in and do their work before you can basically demolish, or you just hire the hazmat contractor to demolish, and they're doing the abatement at the same time. Okay, and you might ask, well, I've heard about hazardous materials, but what is the big problem? Okay, well, it's unseen risk, because if you look around the house, it's not like you can easily see the asbestos or see the lead paint. So it's not readily and immediately visible. You can't see it. That's why it's kind of scary. But these hazardous substances linger in structures for years, and they can cause long-term harm if disturbed. Now, if it's not disturbed, it's not that harmful. Okay, but it's the disturbing part where you cut walls open and you start scraping things, then it becomes more problematic. So, for instance, asbestos, commonly found in insulation, in ceiling tiles, floor tiles, drywall, mud. There's an old building material siding called transite that had asbestos in it too. Also, in the old days, when you have your plumbing pipes and you want to keep the pipes insulated, so there's this wrap. It looks white in color, and it looks sort of like hospital material, gauze or something like that. And they wrap that material around water heater piping and things like that. And that's been found to have asbestos material in it too. So the major risk is when the fibers are flying in the air and they're inhaled during the disturbance. So the problem is these asbestos, if you look under a microscope, there's it looks like shards of glass, real small. You can't see it with the naked eye, but what happens is it doesn't dissolve. So when a human starts breathing that stuff, it goes in their body and it doesn't dissolve. It's sort of like lead in lead paint. So that's the scary part. So let's talk about lead. Common in old paints, water pipes, solder that they use in soldering pipes. And it's especially dangerous with children. It causes learning and developmental issues, and this has been proven. There's many medical studies about having tested children that have high concentration of lead paint, and they have learning and development disabilities and all that. So those studies are available, and it's been around for for many years. Um, a good reference is if you want to search Environmental Protection Agency and you just put in asbestos or lead, and there's thousands of pages that come up. Now let's talk about mold, the four-letter word. It grows in damp, poorly ventilated space, and it can trigger asthma, allergies, and respiratory infections. I've been involved as an expert on mold-related claims, and in like maybe 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, people didn't think it was that bad, and they thought, well, this mold issue, I don't think it's that bad because, I forgot I had a loaf of bread sitting around, and then I remembered, so I looked at it, and there was all this mold growing in the bread. Well, I don't think that's dangerous. Well, that's a different kind of mold. It's not the same mold as the mold that would grow on drywall. Okay, so how do you know what type it is? Well, we don't unless we test it. I can't even look at it and say what type of mold it is. I can look at it and say it is mold, but how do we know? I don't know if it's dangerous or not, right? But surely when you go to the home and garden store to buy drywall, it doesn't come with mold in it, right? So, well, hopefully it doesn't. If it does, take it back and get a refund, okay? Now, here's something that is fairly new. Although it's been around for years, when I say it's fairly new, meaning that it's fairly new in the discovery that it's a hazard. And it's called silica. What is silica? It's created when cutting, grinding, drilling concrete, stone, brick, or man-made tile or countertops. You have these quartz countertops, and it could be either man-made, or if you have granite or marble, just cutting it exposes dust, and it's actually fine particles of silica. Even it's in concrete. So fine dust particles scar lung tissue, leading to silicosis. So it's sort of like breathing lead paint or asbestos. Now, what causes this? Well, you could have just concrete, and if you're grinding the concrete, sanding it, drilling it, or pounding it in any way, and if it releases dust, there's silica in the dust, fine dust, so you don't want to breathe that. So in the past, people were working with concrete in whatever kind of work they're doing, and no one was wearing masks because no one thought it's a big problem, right? But now it is. There's reports of people getting sick, tested by the medical field, and then that's how they came up with, all of a sudden silica is a bad thing now. So it's affecting the whole construction industry. So the silicosis is a deadly, incurable lung disease. It's been confirmed in early on. There's a worker that all he did was fabricate countertops, and that was the first case. The guy was getting sick, and then it's like, well, what do you do? Well, I cut countertop material all day and install. And then he determined that he was breathing all this dust, and that's how he got sick. And then after that, there's more workers that were reported. So it's now a huge health concern. The quartz countertops look really nice, and it's not that expensive compared to if you want to use marble or granite, but it's very hazardous. So the workers got to be prepared. In the old days, they used to bring the slabs and just cut everything on site. And now a lot of people want to, contractors that install this kind of material, they want to cut it in their warehouse where it's easy for protection, and then truck it into the job site, and then they have to make fewer cuts. It's actually safer because if they cut the material in their warehouse, it's more of a confined environment. Okay, more about this quartz countertop. The disease is caused by inhaling the crystallized dust released when cutting or grinding the engineer's quartz. So the quartz, they call it quartzite, or uh, there's different names for the material. What it is actually a quartz material mixed together with other materials and formed to look like it's a slab that you got from a mountain, but it's not like virgin granite or marble countertops where they got these big slabs of granite and marble. It's not the same thing. It's man-made, and of course, this man-made material to look like marble and granite and other kind of stone, but we're talking mainly quartz. There's a name, Cambria. I just remembered it, and it's the same thing. It's all engineered, and when you cut it, it just releases dust that's hazardous. So don't breathe that stuff. So let me show you. If you can see the images, this guy is sanding, and then he's cutting. And if you look, he's wearing safety gloves, right? Which is required, but he doesn't have a mask. Maybe he thinks he's too handsome. He doesn't need to wear the required mask. But this is actually an OSHA violation, by the way. And I mean, if you're doing the work yourself, if you're a homeowner, right, you got to wear a mask. If you're a contractor, you have to wear a mask too. Now, people say, oh, if I'm doing work in my own house and I'm not a contractor, I don't have to follow OSHA laws. Or, oh, I work for a condominium. It's a non-union job. Why do I need to follow OSHA laws? You still got to follow the law. Okay, so it's a big deal. Quartz countertops and silicosis is a major growing health concern. And I'm not a MD. Martin's not a, well, Martin, he plays the MD on TV, but in real life he's really not. And we're not professing to be well versed in medical terminology or medical field or anything. We're not doctors, we're not nurses, we're not really much in the medical field, although we do a lot of research on health and safety. Okay, but we're giving this information to you coming from a building expert standpoint because we're concerned. We're not only concerned about maintaining buildings, we're concerned about people working in buildings. And as I mentioned, all types, your own house, right? Or it could be a 40-story condo project that's a union job. Everybody still is required to follow the same standard of practice. Quartz countertop imports to the U.S. have risen 800% because people like the look and it's cheaper than natural stone. But what happens is by this it increases exposure risk for the fabrication workers. Anybody that's touching a material, grinding it, cutting it, installing it, they're exposed, right? So you got to be very careful. Let's talk about the state of California, right? Which is a major state for construction. The latest report we got in 2023, there were 52 affected workers, 20 with advanced silicosis, and 10 people died from this. So this is not something that we, gloss over and it's like, wow, look at the numbers. It's not a big deal. No, we want to present the information. We want people to say, wow, we never knew about this. And maybe I have that stuff in my own house. All right, regulatory response, OSHA limits. Who governs safety? Construction safety is OSHA, Occupational Safety Hazard. Now, they give certain guidelines about the number of exposure over an 8-hour period, all this stuff, but I don't even follow that. I'm like, it doesn't matter what the exposure limit is over what time period. You best wear your full PPE and be aware, right? So many fabrication shops remain out of compliance. How do I know? We got that information from OSHA. Okay, California, which is a pretty progressive state, and we're in Hawaii, and usually California is the first state that has adoption of something, and then Hawaii usually follows California. Okay, so California adopted permanent silica safety rules in 2024. Look at this. This silica issue has been around for 50 years, but only 2 years ago, California adopted the silica safety rules. So we're actually way behind the time on safety of this one particular issue. So hopefully every state will adopt the similar rules to protect the workers. And I'm not talking only about the construction workers. So let's say you're having a remodel, your kitchen or bath remodel, and you got these quartz countertops, and they're doing the remodel while you're in the house, still living in the house. If they're grinding the quartz while you're living in the house, now you're exposed to breathing that stuff too, right? So if you see that, tell them, hey, can you take that outside and do it outside and don't contaminate the house? I don't want to be breathing that stuff. So what's the deal here? Well, health officials urge stricter regulation, better ventilation, protective equipment, and medical monitoring for workers. Now, if you're living in the house or the condo while they're doing this work, you're subject to the same guidelines. So, are you going to wear protective equipment? What if there's no ventilation? So, if you drive around town and you see contractors working on spalling repair, concrete, and I'm not talking about the quartz now. I'm talking about like a concrete parking deck or a wall or a column or anything, and you see dust. They're drilling concrete, grinding it, cutting it, and you see all this dust. That's hazardous too, that dust. Okay, so don't breathe that stuff. Health impacts of exposure. There's short-term impacts: breathing difficulty, coughing, wheezing, skin irritation, rashes, eye and throat irritation. All of these are warning signs of hazardous materials, and it could be mold too. It could be the dust caused by grinding of the quartz. Okay, long-term impacts: cancer, lung disease from asbestos, blood cancers, chronic respiratory illness, silicosis, COPD, neurological disorders, brain damage from lead exposure. So all the things I mentioned could fall into this category, be it asbestos, mold, lead paint, or breathing the dust from these building materials such as concrete or quartz. Now, beyond workers, family and building occupants can also be exposed through contaminated clothing or lingering dust. So that's something to consider. Public service announcement plan. Rising awareness. There's more reported cases of occupational illness tied to hazardous materials. So the numbers are getting worse, not getting any better. Here's the statistics from OSHA. Thousands of workers exposed annually to asbestos and silica. And just so that I'm clear, the silica exposure is coming from not only the quartz countertops, but it could come from concrete too. Okay, so um, any kind of concrete, older concrete. The CDC, and you remember CDC because they were, prevalent around where we had the pandemic for COVID. So the CDC says lead exposure still affects millions of U.S. homes. Yes, I agree. There's millions of homes, right, that were built prior to 1977-78 that still has lead paint. And there's a couple differences in the lead. There's what's called lead base paint, and there's another. They're all lead, but there's different degrees of lead. So you have to have it tested and measured, right? So there's lead-based paint, and there's what's called lead-containing paint, and there's different degrees of safety. And there's the WHO, World Health Organization. Roughly 125 million people worldwide are exposed to asbestos at work. And that's a lot of people. And this is coming from an international organization. So, as you can see here, the problem is not just a small problem. It's major. It's huge. Here's some case examples. Renovation crews unknowingly expose the hazardous materials during school upgrades. Well, the renovation crew didn't know there were asbestos or lead paint, and they were doing the work, and they got exposed, right? Trying to fix a school. Homeowners inhaling mold spores after water damage repairs. Well, no one knew. You have a leak. Your roof leaks. You have a plumbing leak. It damages the drywall. You can't see the mold, right? But it's inside the wall, and the spores are being released, and you're over there breathing it. And there's several cases I worked on where the people were having health effects, headache, dizziness, sore throat. They go to the doctor, and they get a clean bill of health. And so you wonder, wow, what's going on? So there was one case in Florida where I worked on as a consultant, and they kept getting sick, and the mother was getting sick, and then the child was getting sick. So sick he had to take like weeks off school, and he was behind in his homework. And they took him to the doctor, went to hospital. They ran all these tests, CAT scan, any kind scan, EKG, blood test, whatever, and they couldn't find anything. And so I got involved, and I said, show me pictures of your house. So we went around, and I looked at some of the photos, and I see mold, and I said, you have a mold problem. That's what's causing you to be sick. So I said, close the door. Well, I know this is going to be expensive, or maybe not, but can you move out for like a week or two? Just close the door, move out. You have family, friends you can stay with for a week or two, or stay at a hotel or motel or something. And they go, oh, why? And I said, because your house is making you sick. And so they figured that that's the last resort. So you know what? They did that. And suddenly they got well. And I said, the problem is you're in an environment that's making you sick. You take yourself out of the environment, and now you're suddenly getting well. And they went back to the hospital, and the doctor looked and said, wow, oh, I really can't figure this out. and then she mentioned my name, and she said, "Oh, is that Luke guy a doctor?" And he said, "He's not a medical doctor. He's a building guy." And I was a big hero. And what happened was, well, end of the story was, it was a pretty fairly new home, and then through my help, we got the developer builder to actually buy the house back. Um, I guess there was a threat of a lawsuit or something. But anyway, that was one of my good stories where I help people. Okay, best practices for safety. Number one, PPE, personal protective equipment. Make sure you have it and make sure you wear it. Air monitoring and containment zones. Right? You want to monitor what's going on. If you're working with asbestos or mold or uh, lead, construction's going on, it's an enclosed area, you want to monitor for safety. You don't have to go back in and breathe the leftover mold that was still in the air. Number three, safe disposal and cleanup. And then, number four is, after you finish the work, you want to clean yourself up. And if you have clothes, right, you don't go walking into your house that's not contaminated and contaminate the house because you have all these clothes that have all the dust and stuff that you're now bringing into your house, right? Steps to reduce risk, worker training, very, very important. A lot of people just go because they think they have to, and they just sit there and don't pay attention. Inspections and early detection, very important in adoption of technology. What kind of new technology do we have to help the cause? Okay. Some more steps to reduce risk. Shared role owners ensure compliance. If you're a homeowner, a developer, or a property owner, property manager, right? Don't expect the contractor to be following the rules, right? Although you should, but make sure they do follow the rules. Managers, site managers, resident managers, homeowner association managers provide safe work conditions, right? And contractors, you got to follow the safety standards. Okay, all this are key. Key takeaways: ongoing hidden danger. Hazardous materials are still present in many older buildings, creating risks during repairs or demolition. Here's a photo of an older building. I wouldn't even go in there. It looks too scary, right? Without even knowing if it's safe or not. Some more key takeaways: compliance, regulation, safety matters, awareness, compliance or training, and training are the keys to preventing illness and saving lives. And this is for everybody, not just for the construction workers. Shared responsibility: workers must follow protocols, owners and managers must enforce them, and inspectors must provide oversight. So very important. It's not only on the contractor, it's on everybody. Keep everybody safe. And that's pretty much it. We covered it. What you missed, we've given a lot of webinars like this in the past. It's on our website. What's coming up? We have a whole list of 2 webinars per month for this year. And you might say, well, where do we go to find it? Here's our website. We just rebuilt a brand new one. It's askbuildingexpert.com. And in that website, we have other expert websites, we call it, but it's actually resource material to help you. And then what else? We have National Building Expert blogs. We have a whole list of webinars that we've given. You can watch on demand. You don't need a Netflix or Amazon Prime account. It's free. See how nice Martin and I are to you. And then books. Why don't you snag a few books that you're interested in, because we may change it to you got to buy it on Amazon. So right now, I think you can get a bunch for free. Just download it and save it if you don't have time to read it. So um, here's the Q&A part, and this is interesting part because we don't know what questions people are going to ask us. So you got questions, we got answers. My name and numbers on the screen. If you're not looking, it's 808-754-3425. Email is lanceluke@hawaiibuildingexpert.com. And if you want information and I don't respond right away, that's because I'm out of town. So just be patient. I'm giving a talk about concrete repair in Edinburgh, Scotland. So that should be fun. So let me bring Martin on and see what kind of questions we have right now. Okay,
Yes,
Martin.
Lance, I'm here. You ready for questions?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, well, here's the first one that's come in is what was the most dangerous situation you've personally encountered involving hazardous building materials, and how was it handled? Good question.
I think the most dangerous one was during COVID time. I got called in to inspect this house where people were confined and sick, but they didn't have COVID. So it was kind of strange. I got the reports, right? Negative COVID tests. But at that time, everyone had to wear masks. So I go to the house and I had my mask on, and no one else had their mask, which was kind of weird. But it was inside the house, and there was mold all over the house, and that's why they were sick. So I had to tell them, get out. And although I didn't know what kind of mold it was, I said, I didn't even want to be here breathing this stuff. So then later on, after I think they had the mold remediation done, then they moved back in, and guess what? All their symptoms disappeared, and they were healthy again. So that's a story of how it was the problems with their health were attributed to the mold issue. And they had a dog. Even the dog was sick because the dog was inside breathing the mold too. So it was a strange situation, but I was happy that I was able to help. So I remember that one.
Oh, good answer and good deed done. That's what you do a lot of. So thank you for that.
We try.
Okay, our next question here is, can you share an example where early detection of asbestos, lead, or mold prevented serious health risks or costly remediation?
Yeah, normally when we manage construction projects, it's an older condominium building or older building. And if we're doing, for example, we're doing a cast iron pipe replacement, so we have to cut walls out, cut holes in the floor and the ceiling so we can remove the old pipe and install a new pipe. So this is where the early detection comes in, because we bring in a company that actually does testing of the asbestos and lead, and they test it first before we even cut the walls open and all that. So there's two ways to do it. One is to test it and just if it does have hazardous materials, then we need to abate it before the plumbing contractor can go in and do the work. The other method is just presume that it does have hazardous materials and forget about testing and just go and abate everything, cut it out, and get rid of it, and then the plumbing contractor go in and do his thing. So um, it has to be done in order to protect everybody. Because working in a condo building, you have people still living in the unit, right? So it's not only protecting the contractor, but protecting the inspectors, protecting the engineers, and also the tenants or owners who live in the condo unit. So the objective is to keep everybody safe.
But yep, thanks, Lance. Sounds like it's standard protocol. That's probably always the first defense. Yeah. So good, good. Okay, next question is from your experience, how does Hawaii's humid climate make hazardous materials issues like mold more severe compared to other regions?
Well, I would say that because a lot of homes in Hawaii don't have air conditioning and they use the trade winds, sometimes they can't really control the humidity in their house. And in some cases, when there's a water leak from mostly from plumbing, I guess, although there's some from roof, and there's some from drainage conditions where the water drains toward the house, and now you have the baseboards and all that soaking up water. Um, the mold tends to like the kind of high humidity and grow in those areas. So that's a situation where the environment inside the house is not controllable to a degree. Um, if you compare the Hawaii house to a house on the mainland or a Hawaii house that has air conditioning, you can control the environment inside the house because you have central air or split system or something. So your humidity level actually decreases because you're able to control. You just blast your air conditioning, and now it's a more favorable environment compared to a house that doesn't have any air conditioning and you have mold growing. So mold grows when there's high humidity and um, there's not a lot of sunlight. They tend to be liking the dark. So it's sort of like a vampire, right? It likes the dark. I don't know if a vampire likes high humidity or not. I haven't, been able to interview a vampire, but um, I think that's probably the situation. And I haven't really reviewed any kind of studies or anything about mold in Hawaii versus mold on the mainland, or mold in a non air conditioned house versus one that has air conditioning. But I know from my studies and from my line of work that the humidity factor has a lot to do with the mold growth. So yeah, that's pretty much what I can say about that.
Oh, good. Yeah, I mean, it seems to be. I mean, when we've had problem, and it's like you say, the high moisture area, and the moisture just doesn't go away. And like, well, our side, the Kaneohe and Ko'olau areas, yeah, that's what we get all the time is moisture, and yeah, when the sun doesn't shine, you get all the algae and everything forming around the neighborhood and the walls. So makes sense. Sounds
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Well, I wanna make clear that when I brought up the mold on the drywall is just one building material that the mold grows on. Mold grows on cellulose material, so mold is growing on the paper on the drywall. Likewise, wood is a cellulose material. So I mentioned drywall a lot, but mold also grows on wood. Mold doesn't grow on concrete, right? Um, and if it does, it doesn't stay. So
Right.
you have mold growing on drywall and you have mold growing on wood. So if your house is made out of wood, you have wood framing, wood siding, wood wherever it is, and there's a water source, that's where mold can grow. So I've seen mold on drywall. I've also seen mold on wood. And there have been houses that I inspected where there was both um, mold and termite damage on the same piece of wood. So it wasn't a nice thing to see, but I just thought I'd clear that up.
No, no, that's good. That's a good point to really understand too. Yeah, like I was saying, even for us, as long as the sun shines enough on the moldy or what for us it's the algae kind of area, the stuff all dies right away. So the key is getting sunshine on the those areas that get the mold too to dry it out. Yeah, before it takes too much growth on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, here's something else. If you see mold and you want to dry it out because it's wet, now you gotta be very careful because if you dry the wet mold and the mold is dry now it's so dry that it's just the spores are released in the air.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so there's another issue with that. So just be very careful with how you deal with mold.
Very good. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, next question we get here is which mistakes do workers or property owners most often make when dealing with hazardous materials that put others at risk?
That's a good question. I would say that they don't follow the rules.
Hmm.
They don't follow the rules about even questioning, okay, we're going to cut this wall open because we need to make a bigger space because they're renovating, this area. The question would be, when was the house built, right? And if it was built in the 60s, they should be asking, oh, um, your drywall may contain asbestos and the paint may be lead paint. So I think we need to find out. Most people that I've had to deal with in this kind of situation don't even ask the question. They just go start cutting out things and removing things, and now you have a problem. Because if that section of drywall that they cut has asbestos in it and lead paint, now guess what? Now you're exposing everybody to that. So that's the that's the problem. And property managers should be cognizant of the fact that they're managing the property. You know what year the property was built. You got to say how are you going to deal with if there's any asbestos or any other kind of hazardous materials, right? And the contractor may say that's not our job. So then the property manager has to go back to the owner or homeowner association and say, hey, you know what? We have to test this. So normally there's two ways to do it. The homeowner or homeowner association can pay a company to come in and test for asbestos or lead paint, or you can ask the contractor, can you bring in somebody to test and then let us know? And then after the report comes in, what's your protocol now, right? And the protocol can't be the same if there was asbestos or lead paint, then no asbestos or lead paint. If the contractor says, oh, it doesn't really matter, we're just going to cut the wall anyway, um, be very careful about that because it's a hazardous to be exposing not only themselves, right, but other people too. And what is the protocol, right? You have to have containment. You have to put plastic sheets around if you're dealing with asbestos or lead paint, and you have to have air monitoring to see if there's all clear after that, if it's safe for the containment to come down and people to walk around in the area. So there's set protocols that are followed. It's the problem where people aren't following the protocol that gets into trouble. If you hire a handyman, that guy could care less, right? He's going, I'm not licensed. I don't have to follow what the rules are. But believe it or not, he does.
Oh, very good. Yeah, very, very. Safety first, I guess, is the main thing in all of this. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, we have one more question here, yes, and it is, if you could change one regulation or safety standard to improve protection from hazardous building materials, what would it be and why?
Gee, getting kind of technical here. But I would say that I reviewed the safety standards, and I don't really see any need to add more to it. Um, it's pretty much okay the way it's written, um, but I would recommend that there probably be more training. I think the training part should be mandatory. I would recommend that um, any worker, property manager, site manager, resident manager that has to do with any kind of building renovation and all that, they should be required to take hazmat training so they understand what we're dealing with. I don't think it's out there because when I talk to a lot of people, they still don't know. When I bring up, hey, do you know that if concrete is cut, it could release hazardous materials in the air? And they're like, well, I wouldn't want to breathe that stuff. Yeah, but do you know how bad it is, right? They don't really know for sure. So I think that there should be mandatory training. And I know people get tired of like, I do enough CE, I gotta go here, I gotta go there, I gotta take these courses. But when it comes to health and safety, I think the training would go a long way. I think the mandatory would go a long way. At least, see, the problem is the law is there, but people aren't following it. Why aren't they following it? Because they either ignore it or they don't really know what the law is. And um, the contractors especially, but if you're a property manager, do you know what the rules are? And then are you enforcing those when you hire a contractor? So it should be um, very clear as to education. I think the education would go a long way. And I don't think it should be voluntary. It should be required. Yeah. So, I mean, if people get sick of, well, we're regulated enough, so just let us do our thing. Well, that's one way to look at it. But if you're exposing other people that are innocent to getting sick, right? I don't think that's a good thing. So, coming from a building safety standpoint, um, I think it's very important to be aware. And, that's the reason why we do these, right? We want to educate people about their health and safety with respect to, uh, buildings and construction. That's what it's all about. So, you have any final words, Martin, before we sign off?
Yeah, just it's what you stated there. It's important, and I guess people don't really think about the downstream impacts. I mean, if you think about the costs, health costs for the workers or the people who get this exposure, that's a major factor. That's why, to me, that's the issue with health and safety. Most people don't think about downstream impact, but your numbers, you had stats on, the deaths from silica, and to me, silica is probably relatively new in terms of even my awareness, but I've seen it. I've seen the dust from the cement. I've seen the dust from, actually, I think I even saw it from the granite installations and all that stuff. So yeah, and it's people are sometimes just not thinking about that downstream effect. So I think that's a good reason to do what we do here.
Yeah, good, good. Okay, well, on behalf
And
of Martin and myself, we thank you for joining us. If you're watching the replay and you have any questions or comments, we welcome you to post on whatever social media platforms you're on, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And we continue to do this to provide valuable information and educational data to help you in your lives. And it doesn't matter whether you're a homeowner, property manager, contractor, developer, attorney, architect, engineer, whoever. If you can learn a little bit about what we're talking about and some information, then we're very happy. So we're going to sign off. Hopefully, you sign up for the next webinar, and we'll be here. Thank you and mahalo.